Captain Mira stood at the front of the ship, her hands gripping the cooled metal of the control panel. Outside, the view was breathtaking. They had finally arrived. A new planet, unexplored, full of potential. The stars shimmered faintly, but the planet beneath them was something else entirely. A deep green expanse of forests, with vast rivers that twisted through the landscape like veins of life. It was as if the planet was calling them, urging them to come closer. Landing in 15 minutes, Mira called to her crew, her voice steady despite the excitement she felt. This was what they had been preparing for, the unknown. To explore, discover, and perhaps make history. She turned to her first officer, Eli, who was already adjusting the instruments to bring the ship down safely. Eli nodded, his face a mask of calm. "Everything's looking good, Captain. All systems are running smoothly." The crew of the Endeavour had spent months in deep space, and now they had arrived at their destination. Mira's eyes flicked to the rest of her team, each one of them ready for the next step. There was Juno, the scientist, who was already calculating the atmosphere's composition. Orin, the engineer, who was making sure the landing gear was prepared. And finally, Finn, the communications officer, who had been monitoring for any signals from the planet's surface. "Once we land, we'll conduct an initial survey. Juno, you're in charge of plant samples. Eli, you'll lead the security team. Orin, you stay with the ship. Finn, stay on standby." Mira instructed. "Let's make this quick and safe." Minutes later, the ship touched down gently on the planet's surface. A soft hum filled the air as the engines powered down, and the hatch opened. The warm, humid air rushed in, filling the cabin with the scent of earth and unknown plants. Mira felt a surge of excitement. It was unlike anything she had ever felt before. They were standing on the edge of a new world. "Let's get to work," she said, leading the crew outside. The forest before them was lush and thick. Towering trees, their trunks wide and wrapped in vines, reached toward the sky. Strange flowers in vivid colors bloomed from the ground, their petals soft and glimmering under the light of the sun. Birds, if they could be called that, flitted from tree to tree, their wings almost translucent, glowing with a soft light. "This place is amazing," Juno whispered, kneeling to inspect one of the plants. "I've never seen anything like it." Mira nodded, but her eyes scanned the horizon. The team moved forward, spreading out to begin their survey. The air was thick with life. Every step felt like they were walking through an alien world, one that was both beautiful and unknown. There was something mysterious about the place, something that made the hairs on the back of Mira's neck stand up. Hours passed. They collected samples, took readings, and noted their observations. Everything seemed fine, until the sun began to dip behind the trees. The sky turned a deep orange, and shadows stretched long across the ground. The team was ready to call it a day and return to the ship when they heard it, a soft rustling in the distance. Then another noise, a faint clicking sound, almost like the distant beat of drums. The hairs on the back of Mira's neck prickled. "What was that?" Finn asked, his voice tense. He had been monitoring their communications, but there was nothing on the radio. "I don't know," Mira replied, her hand instinctively reaching for her sidearm. She glanced at Eli, who gave a subtle nod, signaling the security team to be alert. Something didn't feel right. The rustling grew louder, and then a strange melodic sound floated through the air. It was a song of sorts, but it didn't sound human. It was eerie and alien, like a siren call meant to lure them deeper into the woods. "I think it's time to head back to the ship," Eli said, his voice low. Mira hesitated. "We'll leave in 5 minutes. No need to rush just yet." But the more she listened, the more uneasy she became. The sound was getting closer. And then, from the corner of her eye, she saw movement. A flash of something fast and graceful, darting between the trees. It was too quick for her to make out, but it was there. Something was watching them. "Captain," Orin called over the comms, his voice shaky. "There's something outside the ship. I don't think it's a wild animal." Mira's pulse quickened. "Stay inside, Orin. We'll be back soon." She waved for the team to gather. As they began to head back toward the ship, the strange sound intensified. The rustling and clicking became more frequent, and now there was a faint whispering in the wind, almost as if the trees themselves were speaking in a language they couldn't understand. The air grew thick with tension. Then, from the shadows, they saw them. Figures, tall, slender, and lithe, emerged from between the trees, their glowing eyes fixed on the crew. Their movements were fluid, almost unnatural, like they were part of the forest itself. Mira's heart raced. They weren't human. The creatures had a haunting, almost graceful presence. Their skin shimmered in the fading light, and the shapes of their bodies were both beautiful and terrifying. The creatures stood still, watching the crew intently. There was no sign of aggression, but Mira felt an overwhelming sense of danger. They weren't here to greet them. They were here to hunt. "Move," Mira shouted, grabbing Juno's arm and pulling her toward the ship. The others quickly followed, their footsteps quick and urgent. They were being watched. The hunt had begun. Mira's heart pounded as she and her crew hurried back toward the Endeavor. The air felt thick with tension, as though the very planet was holding its breath. Every rustling sound from the trees, every whisper in the wind, made her muscles tighten with fear. She glanced over her shoulder, her eyes darting from shadow to shadow, but the strange figures were gone. For a moment, it seemed like they hadn't even been there. "Stay close," Mira commanded, her voice sharp. Her crew, still tense from the encounter, formed a tight line behind her as they moved through the thick forest. The strange creatures had disappeared as quickly as they had appeared, but Mira knew they were still out there. Somewhere, hidden in the shadows of the trees, watching. Her instincts told her that this was no random encounter. They had been followed, watched. As the group neared the edge of the forest, the Endeavor loomed in the distance, its sleek frame gleaming in the fading sunlight. Relief washed over Mira, but the strange sensation of being hunted never left her. She could feel eyes on her, and the thought chilled her to the bone. "Almost there," Eli muttered, his hand hovering over his weapon. He was a seasoned officer, but even he couldn't hide the unease in his voice. "Something's not right." Mira didn't respond. She was already scanning their surroundings, her eyes darting between the trees. They were close now, only a few hundred meters away from the ship, but it felt like the longest distance she had ever traveled. Just as they stepped into the clearing leading to the ship, the air grew colder. A soft wind stirred the leaves, but it didn't sound like the usual rustle. It was almost like a whisper, a faint melodic hum that seemed to vibrate through the ground beneath their feet. "Did you hear that?" Juno asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Mira nodded, her senses on high alert. The sound seemed to grow louder, clearer. It was a strange song, almost hypnotic, as if the very wind itself was alive. Mira felt her mind racing, trying to make sense of it, but the answer remained elusive. Then, without warning, the creatures reappeared. They came from the trees, moving silently, like shadows in the growing dusk. Their eyes glowed softly, their skin shimmering in the fading light. Mira could see them clearly now. Tall, slender beings with long limbs and fluid movements. They didn't look like anything she had ever seen before, and yet there was something disturbingly familiar about them. The creatures stopped at the edge of the clearing, their glowing eyes fixed on the humans. The silence was deafening. "What do they want?" Orin whispered, his voice trembling. He had never been one for confrontation, and the sight of these alien beings made him uneasy. Mira didn't have an answer. The creatures didn't move, but their gaze was unwavering, intense. There was no sign of aggression, no immediate threat. But Mira knew that didn't mean they were safe. This encounter was far from ordinary. Eli stepped forward cautiously, his hand still gripping his weapon. "We don't want trouble," he said, his voice steady but edged with warning. We're just passing through. No harm intended." For a moment, the creatures remained silent, their eyes never leaving the crew. Then one of them, the largest, with shimmering silver skin, stepped forward. It was graceful, its movements almost hypnotic, and yet there was something dangerous about it. The creature tilted its head, almost as if it were studying them. Then, to everyone's surprise, it spoke. Visitors from another world. Its voice was soft, melodic, yet with an underlying strength that sent a chill down Mira's spine. The words were clear, but there was a strange quality to the way they were spoken, as if they didn't belong to the planet at all. "We didn't mean to intrude," Mira said, keeping her tone calm. "We're explorers, here to study your world." The creature's eyes flickered, and it made a low, clicking sound. Mira had no idea what it meant, but it was clear the creature wasn't fully convinced. "You come to study, but you do not understand," the creature replied. "You are not like the others." Mira's heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean? Who are the others?" The creature stepped closer, its eyes narrowing. "You are different. The others are not like you. But you have power." Mira glanced at her crew, confused and uneasy. What was it talking about? Power? She looked back at the creature, trying to make sense of its cryptic words. Before she could speak, another creature, this one smaller but just as striking, stepped forward. It was silent at first, but then it raised its arms slightly, and the air around the group seemed to shimmer with a strange energy. "We seek strength," the smaller creature said, its voice almost a whisper. "You have it. You do not know it yet, but you are what we need." Mira frowned, a cold knot forming in her stomach. Strength. What was this creature talking about? And why did it seem so sure that they had what it needed? "We don't want any trouble," Eli said again, his voice firmer now. "We just want to leave this place and return to our ship." The larger creature cocked its head once more, its glowing eyes fixed on Eli. "You will not leave. Not yet." The words were simple, but their meaning was clear. The creatures weren't going to let them go that easily. A tense silence filled the clearing. Mira's mind raced. They had been too curious, too eager to explore, and now they were trapped. The Huntresses weren't just hunting for food. They were hunting for something much more valuable. Power. And it seemed they believed the crew of the Endeavor had what they needed. "We are not your prey," Mira said firmly, stepping forward. "We came to explore, not to fight. If you want something from us, you'll have to tell us what it is." The larger creature stared at her for a long moment. And then, slowly, it nodded. "You will learn," it said. "Soon. You are not what you think you are." Mira's heart pounded as she felt the weight of those words. Something was unfolding, something far more dangerous than she had anticipated. The Huntresses didn't just want to capture them. They had a plan, and Mira wasn't sure they would survive it. Mira stood motionless, her breath shallow. The creature's words echoed in her mind. "You are not what you think you are." What did that mean? Who were they? Why had they singled out her team? And what did they want with them? A strange feeling of being pulled into something bigger than themselves weighed heavily on her chest. The creatures hadn't moved, still standing in the clearing as the sun dipped below the horizon. The air was thick with silence, but Mira could feel the tension building. It was as if the very trees around them were waiting, watching, listening. "We need to go back to the ship now," Eli said, his voice low but urgent. "We've learned enough for today." Mira shook her head. "No, something's happening here. We need answers." She turned to face the alien creatures. "What do you want from us? Why are we different? What power do you think we have?" The large creature, the one with shimmering silver skin, stepped forward again. This time, its eyes seemed more focused, almost softer. It tilted its head as it regarded Mira. "You do not understand," the creature said, its voice soft but firm. "You will. In time." The small creature next to it raised its arms in a slow, deliberate motion, and the air around them seemed to shift. The light dimmed as though the trees themselves were drawing the last of the sun's warmth. Then something began to glow faintly within the depths of the forest, a soft light, pulsing in rhythm with the hum they had heard earlier. Mira felt a shiver run down her spine. "What is that?" she asked. The large creature spoke again. "The ritual has begun. The power within you will soon awaken." "Ritual," Juno repeated. She had been standing quietly, her curiosity piqued by the strange words. "What do you mean by ritual?" The creature's glowing eyes seemed to shine brighter, and for a moment, Mira could almost hear the forest itself breathing. The trees, the wind, even the ground beneath their feet seemed to shift, as if aligning with the creature's words. "The ritual is the cycle of life and strength. To bond with a being of power, to share their strength, and become one," the creature explained. Its voice was gentle but filled with ancient wisdom. "We do not take. We connect. You have much to give, and we have much to offer." Mira exchanged a glance with Eli. "Bond with us?" she asked, her voice skeptical. "We're not here to become part of any ritual." "You misunderstand," the creature replied. "We do not take your flesh. We seek what lies beneath the surface, the essence that makes you human." "Essence?" Orin echoed, his face furrowed in confusion. "What do you mean?" The creature's eyes sparkled as if it had been waiting for this question. "Every being has a power. It is the strength that binds them to the universe. We, the Huntresses, draw from this power. We have lived long, and to survive, we must connect to those who are different, who are not like us." Mira frowned. This was starting to sound less like an encounter and more like an exchange. The creatures weren't interested in capturing them for food. They didn't even seem to care about the humans' physical bodies. Instead, they wanted something else, a connection of power, a shared energy. "I still don't understand," Juno said, her voice almost a whisper. "What do you need us for?" The small creature stepped forward, its eyes shining brightly. "You are of many worlds. You carry strength in your mind, your spirit, and your bodies. We have watched you. You are different from those we have encountered before. We seek that strength." Mira's heart raced. It seemed as though the Huntresses were speaking in riddles. Power, essence, what did they want with human strength? And why now? The large creature moved closer. "We offer you a choice," it said, its tone softer now, almost inviting. "Join us. Become one with the ritual. Share your strength with us. In exchange, we will give you knowledge, knowledge of the stars, of worlds beyond your own. Power, the kind of power that can change the course of your destiny." Mira took a deep breath. A part of her wanted to refuse, to retreat back to the safety of the ship and forget this strange encounter ever happened. But another part of her, a deeper part, was curious. Power, knowledge, what were they truly offering? "We don't need your power," Eli said firmly, stepping forward. "We don't want to become part of your ritual." The creature's eyes flickered with a strange sadness, and for a moment, Mira almost thought she saw something like regret in its gaze. "It is not a matter of need. It is a matter of understanding. You are not the only ones who have much to learn." The air around them grew heavier, and the soft hum of the forest intensified. Mira could feel the energy in the clearing shifting. It was like the planet itself was reacting to the ritual, as though the earth itself was alive and aware. "We are offering you more than mere power," the creature continued. "We offer you the opportunity to see the world as we see it, to see through our eyes, to understand the balance of the universe." Juno's voice trembled with a mix of awe and fear. "But what happens if we refuse?" The large creature stood silently for a moment before responding. "If you refuse, we will let you go. But you will never truly understand. You will leave, knowing nothing of what we offer. But the bond, the connection, will be lost." Mira's mind raced. The offer was tempting. Too tempting. Knowledge, power, strength. It was all so mysterious. And yet, something told her that accepting their offer could come with a price. Finally, she spoke. We need time to think. We can't make this decision now. The creatures didn't speak for a long moment. Then the silver-skinned one nodded, slowly. You have time, it said. But time is a gift we cannot give forever. With that, the creatures turned and disappeared into the shadows of the forest. Their glowing eyes were the last thing visible as they moved further into the trees. Mira watched them go, her heart heavy with the weight of the decision that loomed before them. What were they really offering? And what would the consequences be if they accepted? We need to get back to the ship, she said quietly, turning to her crew. We need to think, and we need to be ready. The crew nodded in agreement, but none of them said a word as they made their way back to the Endeavor. They knew that whatever lay ahead, things would never be the same. The Endeavor was quiet as the crew gathered in the ship's briefing room. The distant stars twinkled through the observation windows, but inside, there was no comfort in the familiar hum of the ship's systems. Mira stood at the head of the table, her fingers tapping lightly on the cool surface. She could feel the weight of her crew's eyes on her, all waiting for her to make a decision. Eli stood near the back, his arms crossed. He had been quiet since their return to the ship, but Mira could sense the unease in his posture. Juno, on the other hand, looked almost hypnotized by the encounter. She had never been one to shy away from the mysteries of the universe, but the creature's offer had left her deeply intrigued. I still don't get it, Orin muttered, leaning forward in his seat. What do they want from us? Why us? And how can they be so sure we have power? We're just a team of explorers. They called it a ritual, Finn added, glancing up from the communication console. But why would they want to connect with us? What would they get from it? Mira took a deep breath, her eyes scanning the room. She could see that the team was divided. Part of them was curious, eager to understand the aliens' offer. Another part was skeptical, unsure of what was really at stake. But Mira knew the decision would ultimately fall on her shoulders. Whatever this power is, it's clear that they believe we have it, Mira said, her voice steady. They aren't asking for us to fight or surrender. They want something deeper, a connection. But I don't trust them. Juno frowned. But think of what they're offering. Knowledge. Power. They've seen things we can't even imagine. Maybe we could learn from them, just as much as they could learn from us. We don't know anything about them. Juno, Eli interjected sharply. For all we know, they could have some hidden agenda. What if this ritual isn't what they say it is? We might be walking into something dangerous. Mira nodded, understanding Eli's concern. We don't know what the consequences of accepting this offer would be. We could walk away, but that might mean leaving behind an opportunity we'll never get again. I agree, Juno said, her voice softer now. I think we should consider it. Maybe we could learn something that could change everything we know about the universe. Mira hesitated. The uncertainty weighed heavily on her mind. There was no way to be certain of what the Huntresses wanted, and if they accepted their offer, there was no turning back. But on the other hand, if they refused, they might never understand the true potential of what had just been presented to them. The question is, Mira said after a long pause, do we risk it? Can we trust them? Eli clenched his jaw, his gaze steady on Mira. We don't know enough. I vote we stay cautious. There are too many unknowns here. I agree with Eli, Finn added. We don't even know what the ritual really involves. We can't afford to gamble with our lives, no matter how tempting their offer is. Mira glanced around the table. Orin was sitting quietly, staring at the table, lost in thought. What do you think, Orin? She asked. Orin looked up, a faraway look in his eyes. I don't know, but I can't shake the feeling that we're missing something important. The way they spoke, it's like they know something about us, something we don't understand. Exactly, Mira agreed. They know something we don't, and we have to decide if we want to find out what that is. The room fell silent as each person weighed the decision. Mira could feel the tension building, the uncertainty pressing down on her. They were standing at a crossroads, and no matter what they chose, it would change everything. After several long minutes, Mira spoke again. I think we need to go back. Not to agree to their offer, but to learn more. We can't make this decision based on what we've learned so far. We need more information. I think you're right, Juno said quietly, her voice filled with a mix of excitement and caution. But we have to be careful. We don't know what kind of control they have over us once we're in their territory. Eli frowned. We'll go in as carefully as we can, but if anything feels off, we pull out. No risks. Mira nodded, appreciating the agreement. They were in this together, and she wasn't about to put her crew in unnecessary danger. We'll go back, but this time, we'll go prepared. We'll take a team, but we'll keep our distance. If we sense anything wrong, we leave immediately. We could send a small team to make contact, Finn suggested. Just a few of us, not the whole crew. That way, we don't put everyone in danger. Mira considered the idea. A smaller team would reduce the risk of drawing too much attention, but it also meant fewer people to deal with any potential threats. It was a difficult choice, but in the end, it seemed like the best option. All right, she said, taking charge of the situation. I'll lead the team. Eli, Juno, and Finn, you're with me. The rest of you stay on the ship and keep an eye on everything. If anything goes wrong, we'll need you to be ready. The team members nodded, their faces set with determination. Everyone knew the stakes, and everyone understood that the choice they were making could shape the future of their journey. Mira felt a heavy weight on her shoulders as she gave the order. The unknown awaited them, and there was no way of knowing what they would find. But one thing was certain. Whatever happened next, they were about to uncover secrets that could change the course of their mission and their lives forever. The next morning, Mira and her small team prepared to return to the forest. The decision had been made, and now there was no turning back. They had agreed to go back to the Huntresses, but this time, they would be cautious, keeping a safe distance while trying to learn more about the creatures and the ritual they had mentioned. Mira stood at the airlock of the Endeavor, looking out at the dense forest ahead. The ship was safely anchored a few kilometers away, and the forest stretched out before them like a vast, living entity filled with hidden mysteries and dangers. Ready? Eli asked, checking the equipment one last time. He had a rifle slung over his shoulder and a few extra supplies in a bag, just in case. Mira nodded. We'll stick to the plan. Approach cautiously, and if anything feels wrong, we pull out immediately. Juno, standing beside them, was visibly nervous. She wasn't one for combat, but her curiosity had gotten the better of her, and she had insisted on coming along. What if they want us to do something we don't understand? She asked, her voice uncertain. Mira placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. We'll make sure we don't do anything we're not comfortable with. Just remember, we're in control. Finn, the quietest of the group, adjusted his gear. Let's just hope we don't find ourselves in another trap. The team made their way into the forest, carefully making their way toward the clearing where they had first encountered the alien beings. As they walked, the forest seemed even more alive than before. The air was thick with the sounds of distant creatures, and the trees towered over them like silent sentinels, watching their every move. The further they walked, the more uneasy Mira became. Something didn't feel right. The atmosphere in the forest was heavy, and every rustle of leaves seemed to carry a hidden meaning. She kept her eyes scanning the surroundings, alert for any movement. It's too quiet, Juno whispered, glancing around nervously. It's almost like they're waiting for us. I go like this, Eli muttered, his grip tightening on his rifle. Stay sharp, everyone. They continued forward, keeping their voices low. As they approached the clearing, Mira noticed the strange energy in the air again. It felt almost like an electric charge, crackling through the atmosphere. When they reached the clearing, the Huntresses were already there, standing in their usual formation at the edge of the forest. Their glowing eyes were fixed on the group, and despite their calm demeanor, Mira could sense that something had changed. "You came back," the large creature with silver skin said. Its voice was still melodic, but this time there was a different tone in it, an expectation. "We need to understand more," Mira said, her voice steady. "We don't want to make a decision without knowing what's at stake." The huntress stepped forward, its movement fluid and graceful. "You will understand soon," it replied. "But first, the ritual must begin." Mira's pulse quickened. She exchanged a quick glance with Eli, who was already scanning the surroundings, his weapon ready but not raised. Finn and Juno stood behind them, their expressions a mix of curiosity and caution. "I don't like this," Eli muttered again, his eyes narrowing. "There's something about the way they're acting. It's like they know what we'll do before we do it." "We need answers," Mira said firmly. She wasn't going to back down now. They had come too far to turn back without knowing more. "What is this ritual? And what exactly do you want from us?" The large huntress tilted its head. "It is not about what we want. It is about what you need. The ritual will awaken the power within you." The small huntress beside it made a soft clicking sound, almost like an excited whisper. "You will become one with the earth, with the stars. You will see through our eyes and feel the world as we feel it." Mira's heart raced. The words sounded beautiful, almost poetic, but there was something unsettling about them. She glanced at her crew again, searching their faces for reassurance. But they all seemed as unsure as she was. "Why us?" Finn asked, his voice quiet. "Why do you think we have this power? We're just explorers." The huntress with silver skin looked at him for a long moment, its glowing eyes piercing. "Because you are different. You are of the stars, but you do not yet know your place among them." Juno's eyes widened. "What do you mean? You've been watching us." "Yes," the huntress replied. "You are not like the others we have met. You have the potential to change the course of the future, to connect with the universe in ways no other species has." Mira took a step forward. "We're not here to be part of your plan. We just want to understand, to learn." The large huntress seemed to consider this for a moment before nodding slowly. "Then learn you shall. But first, you must be part of the ritual. Only then will you truly understand." Mira's mind raced. The huntresses had been watching them, had known more about their mission than they had let on. What if they were right? What if they really did have some kind of power? The thought was both exhilarating and terrifying. "All right," Mira said, after a long pause. "We'll go through with it. But no tricks. No hidden motives. We do this on our terms." The huntresses nodded in unison. "It will be as you say. The ritual will reveal what you need to see." Mira turned to her crew, giving them a last chance to voice any doubts. But no one spoke. They had come this far, and now there was no turning back. Whatever the ritual entailed, they would face it together. "Okay," Mira said, her voice firm. "Let's begin." The air around them seemed to shift, the very ground beneath their feet trembling slightly. The glowing eyes of the huntresses brightened as they raised their arms in a slow, synchronized motion. The wind picked up, and the hum from earlier filled the air again, louder now, like the beginning of a storm. Mira felt a strange energy surround her, a pull deep within her chest, as though something was stirring inside her. Her body felt heavy, like she was being drawn into something greater, something beyond her understanding. The ritual was beginning, and all she could do was wait and see what would come next. The air in the clearing grew thick with an electric hum, and Mira could feel it vibrating through her bones. It was as though the ground beneath her feet was alive, pulsing in rhythm with the huntress's movements. Her heart raced in her chest, and her breath came in shallow bursts. The ritual was starting, and she couldn't shake the feeling that something enormous was about to happen. The huntresses stood in a circle around them, their glowing eyes focused on each member of the crew. The large, silver-skinned one raised its arms slowly, and the soft hum of the forest seemed to respond, growing louder, almost as if the entire world was listening to the ritual. The trees, the wind, even the sky above them seemed to hold its breath. Mira glanced at her team. They stood close together, their expressions tense but determined. Eli's hand hovered near the weapon slung across his back, but he didn't draw it. Finn had his eyes closed, almost like he was meditating, while Juno seemed to be taking in everything around her with wide eyes. Mira knew they were all feeling it. The strange energy that filled the air, the sense of something vast and unknown that was about to unfold. "We're ready," Mira said, her voice steady but filled with uncertainty. The huntress with silver skin nodded, its voice soft but firm. "Then let the ritual begin." The air around them shifted, and Mira felt a strange pressure build in her chest. It wasn't painful, but it was intense, like an invisible force pushing against her from all sides. She clenched her fists, trying to stay grounded, trying to hold on to something familiar in the midst of the growing tension. Then, without warning, the ground beneath them trembled, and the trees around the clearing began to shake. The sound of crackling energy filled the air, and the glow from the huntress's eyes brightened, lighting up the entire clearing. Mira felt a strange pull in her chest, a magnetic force that seemed to be drawing her closer to the glowing figures. "Stay calm," Mira whispered to her crew, though she wasn't sure if she was reassuring them or herself. "We don't know what's happening yet." The silver-skinned huntress began to speak, its voice carrying a deep, resonant tone that echoed through the clearing. "This is the moment when you will understand, when the power within you will awaken. You will see the universe as we see it." Mira felt her breath catch in her throat. She wasn't sure what it meant to see the universe, but she could already feel something stirring deep within her, a warmth, like a fire slowly kindling in her chest. It wasn't painful, but it was powerful, almost overwhelming. Suddenly, the energy surged, and Mira's vision blurred. She gasped as images flashed before her eyes. Glowing stars, swirling galaxies, and strange distant planets. She saw flashes of alien civilizations, their towering structures and advanced technology, their histories unfolding before her in an instant. But none of it made sense. The images came too fast, too quickly, and Mira struggled to keep up with them. Then, the images stopped. For a moment, Mira felt dizzy. She swayed slightly, gripping the ground for support. She could still feel the energy, but it was no longer as intense. She looked around, her eyes searching for any sign that the ritual had ended. The large huntress spoke again, its voice calm and steady. "Now you know. The universe is vast, but it is also fragile. We are not the only ones who seek its power. You will need to protect it." Mira's heart raced. She had seen things she couldn't explain. The universe was so much bigger than she had ever imagined, but there was something else, something dark lurking just beyond the edge of her vision. She could feel it now, a distant threat, a shadow that stretched across the stars. The huntress continued, "The power within you will grow, but it will not be without cost. You must learn to control it, or it will control you." Mira blinked, trying to process the huntress' words. She wasn't sure what had just happened, but she knew one thing for certain. The ritual wasn't over. Something had changed inside her. She could feel it deep in her bones, a connection to something greater, something older than her understanding of the universe. "Did you see it?" Juno whispered, her voice barely audible. "Did you see everything?" Mira nodded slowly. "Yes, but I don't understand it. It was like everything was flashing before my eyes, but I couldn't make sense of it." "We need to go," Eli said sharply, his eyes scanning the surroundings. "I don't trust this. We need to leave before we're caught in something we can't control." Mira's mind raced. Eli was right. The ritual had given them a glimpse into something vast, But it had also left them with more questions than answers. She didn't know what to believe, what to trust. But one thing was clear: the power they had just felt was real. And it was dangerous. "We're leaving," she said, her voice firm. "But we need to do it carefully. Stay alert." The Huntresses watched them with calm, unreadable expressions, as if they were waiting for something. Mira couldn't tell if they were satisfied with the ritual or if they had more in store for them. "You have seen what you need to see," the silver-skinned huntress said softly. "The path ahead is yours to choose. But remember, there are forces that will try to stop you. Forces that want the power you now possess." Mira turned toward her crew, motioning for them to follow her. "We need to get back to the ship now." The team turned and began to move back toward the edge of the forest. The air still felt thick with energy, but the intense pull had lessened. As they walked, Mira's mind raced. What had they just experienced? What had the Huntresses meant by the forces that would try to stop them? And how were they supposed to control the power they had just awakened? "Stay focused," Eli said, his voice low but steady. "We don't know what comes next, but we're not in this alone." Mira nodded, grateful for the support. Whatever lay ahead, they would face it together. And the answers they sought were just beginning to unfold. The walk back to the Endeavor felt longer than it had on the way out. Mira couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed. The energy from the ritual still buzzed in her veins, faint but persistent. She could feel it there, like an invisible current pulling at her thoughts. Every step she took felt heavier than the last. The forest was eerily silent now. The distant sounds of wildlife had faded, and the wind no longer rustled through the trees. It was as though the entire world was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. Mira glanced over her shoulder at her team. Eli was still alert, his eyes constantly scanning the surroundings, and Finn walked with a quiet intensity, his gaze lost in thought. Juno seemed lost in her own mind as well, her face pale, her hands trembling slightly. "Are you all right?" Mira asked, her voice soft but concerned. Juno didn't look up, but she nodded. I don't know what to think anymore. What we saw, it was all so much. And the power, it felt like it was right there, within our reach." Mira felt the same way. The vision had been overwhelming. Galaxies and civilizations, strange and beautiful, all flashing before her eyes. But the more she thought about it, the more questions came to her. What was it the Huntresses had wanted them to see? What did they mean by forces that would try to stop them? As they reached the edge of the forest, the Endeavor came into view. The ship looked small against the vastness of the planet's surface, but it was a comforting sight. It was their home, their safe place. "We're almost there," Mira said, quickening her pace. Once aboard, the crew made their way to the ship's central hub. The control room was silent, save for the hum of the ship's systems. Mira sat down at the command console, her fingers hovering over the controls. She could feel the weight of the decision ahead. They had been given a glimpse of something incredible, something dangerous. But what should they do with it? "Mira, we need to talk," Eli said, his voice urgent as he entered the room. "We're not ready for this. We can't just ignore the dangers of what we've learned." Mira looked up at him, meeting his intense gaze. "I know. I feel it too. But we can't just walk away from it either. We saw something, Eli. Something that could change everything." Finn entered the room as well, his expression serious. "We don't even know what it is we've seen. What if it's a trap? What if the Huntresses had an agenda all along?" Juno followed them in, her eyes wide, still processing everything they had gone through. "We need to figure out what this power means, what it can do, and what we can do with it." Mira sat back in her chair, taking a deep breath. "I agree, but we need to be careful. We're dealing with something we don't fully understand. I don't know what the Huntresses wanted from us, but I do know one thing. We can't ignore it." Eli clenched his jaw, frustration evident on his face. "We don't even know if we can trust them. We don't know if the power is real or if we're just being manipulated." Mira looked down at her hands. She could still feel the strange energy in her chest, a faint warmth that hadn't gone away. The power was real. She knew that much. But what did it mean for them? What kind of responsibility came with it? "We don't have all the answers," she said quietly. "But we have to make a choice. We can either embrace this power, try to control it, and learn from it, or we can walk away and pretend it never happened. But I don't think we can do that. Not after what we saw." Finn nodded slowly. "I agree. We've been given a chance to do something incredible. But we have to be careful. We can't let it consume us." Juno's eyes were wide, and her voice was shaky. "What if we fail? What if we can't control it? What if the forces they warned us about, what if they come for us?" Mira turned to her, her expression softening. "We don't know what's out there, Juno. But we're in this together. Whatever comes next, we face it as a team." Eli sighed, looking out the window at the stars. "I'm not saying we shouldn't try. I'm just saying we have to be cautious. We don't know what's out there, or what kind of enemies we might make by accepting this power." Mira stood up, walking over to the observation window. The stars stretched out before her, vast and endless. She could feel the weight of the universe on her shoulders, but she also felt a sense of determination. They had been given a glimpse of something more, something that could change the course of their lives. The power was real, and it was inside them. The question was, what would they do with it? "We don't have all the answers," Mira said, her voice firm. "But I believe we can make a difference. We've been given this opportunity for a reason. And together, we'll figure it out." Eli and Finn exchanged a glance, then nodded. Juno stood beside Mira, her face still uncertain, but there was a spark of resolve in her eyes. "All right," Eli said, his voice steady. "But we proceed carefully. We stay alert. And we don't let this power control us." Mira smiled, her heart lifting. "Agreed." The crew stood together, their decision made. They would embrace the power they had been given, but they would do so cautiously, always aware of the dangers that lay ahead. The universe was vast, and there were forces out there that would seek to use their newfound abilities for their own purposes. But Mira knew one thing for certain. Whatever came next, they would face it as a team. And in that moment, standing together, Mira felt ready for whatever the universe had in store for them.